Hey, Gunner, you're situated. Come. Oh, okay. To bite my tail. To help. She's too happy. Ah! Oh, oh. No, look. Oh.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back. I'm about to get started on tonight's video. I'm sorry I'm a bit late, as this was supposed to be Sunday morning, not Sunday evening. Let me finish getting set up and I will show you what I'm about to talk about. Well, this is my air compressor as I described to you last time. This is my airbrush. However, this readout is saying 99 psi, but so is my regulator readout. Alright, you always want to charge an empty air compressor with the regulator all the way in. The regulator can get stuck if it's any lower, and what that means is that you will blow out your airbrush because the regulator will not kick in until it's fully charged. So, now that we know it's fully charged, we take a look at the knob. It says that if we turn it this way, counterclockwise, that we will lower our air pressure. Now, the gauge that we have is on the airline. So, you hear that hiss, and you can watch the gauge drop. Notice the tank gauge does not drop. The reason why the tank gauge does not drop is because that's the air that you have in reserve in the airline. Now I'm going to lower this down to about 25 psi. I know that big mark's 30. There's 25. Alright. Now, unfortunately, most airbrushes, and I'm sorry about my hands being in the way, most airbrushes have this little bit on it. It's pretty small. Okay. Now that's great for if you got a propellant can top, but this is a pretty standard screw pattern. What you need is this little piece right here. This little piece is known as an airbrush to 1/4 inch airline converter. This piece on the back end is a 1/4 inch airline bit. That's the airline we're using. And if you use your plumber's tape, it'll create a good seal. Let me get this reconnected here. And this just screws right in. Sorry, it's awful hard to line threads and hold camera. My tripod I can't find right now, and I would need a tall one for this. So I'm sorry about all the bouncing around, but I can't find my tall tripod. There's an O-ring inside the brass side to keep air from leaking out. There's another O-ring inside of here that if you're not careful you can blow out with too much pressure, and that'll make any airbrush not want to work. Now this is a single action Pache Model H. Alright, I got it with a starter kit. Now you'll notice that this collar and chuck here looks kind of awesome. It's called a quick release, and if we look down inside of there, you'll see a little ball. That little ball is actually holding all the pressure back in the line. So you got no air leak to that point. But press these two together. If I can do this one-handed. There we go. And now you've got air going to your airbrush. As we can hear the hiss, we want to double check our air pressure gauge. The air pressure gauge on the regulator end has fallen. That is normal. You bring it back up to 25 psi, and that's at 30 actually. But you want to make sure that every time that you release air in the airbrush, that when you release the button, it goes back up to that 25-30 psi mark. That's more than enough for airbrushing, as you can hear through the hissing. Alright, there's nothing in this airbrush right now. When I load up this airbrush, I like to try to have on hand all of the stuff that I need to do it, especially an empty jar of nothing but soapy water. But that's how you set up an airbrush to make it ready to paint. Now when you're done painting, you need to run a bottle, a whole bottle of nothing but dish soap and water in it. And it could be about 3 drops of dish soap and some water. Run it completely through it. Alright. Then release that bottle. Now not airbrushes are the same, but my Model H has a little clip right up here. You need to pull that clip, save it, set it for later. Unscrew your adjustment tip. Alright, and let me see if the air compressor will hold the camera. No, it won't. Alright, well I'm going to pause this and get out my mini tripod to finish this. Alright, we've already got the clip out. What we need to do is we need to push back on that fit. Alright, there's your needle. There's the needle. The paint actually flows through this. I don't know if I can get that to show. Well, not in this bad of lighting. But your paint goes in here and it gets pulled out at the tip. It gets pulled out through this little tip. And yeah, we can see through that. That is what needs to be cleaned. The rest of a single action external mix airbrush does not need to be cleaned. Alright, unless you get a massive buildup of gunk, which I don't have. And every now and again it'll get paint in there, and there's a little hole in the back. That's the very tip. Alright, if that hole gets clogged with paint, which should actually never happen, there's a little hole. That should never actually happen, for the simple fact is the paint gets nowhere near that. It's being pushed past it by the air pressure. But your airbrush will still work, even like this. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, why get an air compressor if I can't run the air compressor at the same point in time that I'm airbrushing? Because it'll give a pulse. Well, propellant cans are a cheap option, but even they lose pressure. But so does an air compressor. It's not really the air compressor that does the work, but the compression tank on the air compressor that does the work. Yeah. The compressor tank holds all the pressure. Just as soon as I can get this back together, I will show you what I mean. Alright. Now I'm going to pick you up. You're going to wiggle a little bit. But here we are again taking a look at my gauges. This one here now reading about 85 pounds of air. That's normally where my air compressor kicks back on. Now if we take a look at both gauges, I've got a steady stream of air. I can keep painting. And I can just keep right on painting. No pulsing, no nothing. You can hear it. It's going. Constant, steady 25 psi coming out that line. Well, probably about 15 steady. But, no, that's right, about 25. That thing's just about to hit 60 psi. And I've been holding it for about a minute. We'll hold it a little bit longer. Let's let it hit 60 psi. There's 60 psi. Now I'm going to let it fall until it reaches 50 psi. This could take a little while. I'm still airbrushing away constantly. I could be painting this entire time. I've still not lost any air pressure for painting. And there's 55 pounds still in the tank. Your average propellant can is now dead, especially from continuous use. There's 50 psi. Now, I can still use that. I can still keep going till the gauges match each other, which is still a long time away. And that's what I mean by you ought to have yourself an air compressor, because even when it's not running, due to this tank down here, you can keep right on working. It's also good for dusting things, as you can see. That's the air coming out. And this little bit here you can get at Harbor Freight for about $3 to $5. It'll work with all the airbrushes that have the proper connection at the end. Unfortunately, with Testors airbrushes, some of the cheaper ones, not the Aztecs, but their cheaper airbrush uses a different bit. I don't know what that is or what size threads that is. But I hope you enjoyed my walkthrough on how to properly take care of an airbrush. Well, how to properly connect an airbrush to an air compressor. Now, I could turn this back on, but it'd be really, really loud right now. So I'm going to leave it as is. Your regulator is your friend. And no, I don't use a moisture trap. The air that comes out of there is awful dry to me. Feels dry anyways. I just make sure I bleed out my tank after every use. And if I'm doing a lot of airbrushing, I'll drain the tank and bleed the tank of all water every about 2-3 hours of airbrushing. All your water will build up in this tank, but it's when it builds up to a point where it's starting to come out the hose that you need to worry about. Pretty much just as soon as you can feel water when you press down on this button coming out the front, watch that, air's dry as a bone. As soon as you can feel water coming out there, shut her off, because you need to bleed the tank. Now, some of you guys might get an inline water regulator thing. They'll sit there in between the air line and the regulator, and that'll also have a little screw at the bottom that you can just drain the water out of. I don't need that because I properly maintain my tank. Well, have a good one.